please welcome the Churchill Club Chairman of the Board, Avery Lyford.
Good evening. I'm Avery Lyford, Chairman of the Board of the Churchill Club. Welcome to the program, Unlocking Social Technologies, presented in partnership with McKinsey Global Institute. It's been a great experience working with MGI, and I'd especially like to call out the help of Rebecca Roboy. And let us please welcome our distinguished set of speakers. We have Wendy Arnott from TD Bank Group, flew in just for this. BJ Fogg from Stanford's Persuasive Technology Lab. Dave Gutelius from Jive Software. Clara Shi from Hearsay Social. And of course our moderator, Michael Chui from McKinsey Global Institute. Thank you all for being here. It is great to see such an amazing audience here. Remember that you're the reason we're holding this program. If a question that is not asked that you think should be asked, there'll be Q&A at the end of the program. Please ask for a mic, and you'll get a chance to put that question to the panel. Our next program is on the evening of July 31st, next week, and we've got the Chief Marketing Officer agenda, which I'm sure social media may play some small part in. With Chief Marketing Officers from DreamWorks Animation, Google, Intuit, and SAP. I encourage you all to attend. That event will be down in Santa Clara. And then on the evening of August 20th, we've got a program about the future of conversing with technology, which has got an all-star roundtable, including Steve Wozniak. That program will be in Palo Alto. Finally, we've got a remarkable set of programs on Thursday, September 13th. First, it's a day-long program called Changing the Game. We'll unpack change for you and have insights in it with interactive breakaway sessions that focus on such important mega topics as education, energy, healthcare, and others. That same evening, we're presenting the Churchill Awards, which is a program designed to inspire others by highlighting excellence in terms of leadership, innovation, collaboration, and societal benefit. Last year's winners included Microsoft for their Connect in terms of the teamwork that brought that together, Salman Khan for the Khan Academy, Elon Musk, and Facebook. This year's winners will be announced shortly. Be sure to mark your calendars for both those events on September 13th. And those programs will be held down in Santa Clara. And then if you're tweeting, which of course you will be since it's about social media, please use the hashtags Churchill Club and MCK Social, and you'll find other Twitter codes in your program. Now, let me introduce our moderator, Michael Chui. Dr. Chui is a principal and senior fellow of the McKinsey Global Institute, which is the think tank for McKinsey. Recently, Michael was elected as a partner for McKinsey, and he literally travels the world, presenting research on major disruptive trends, including things like big data, the Internet of Things, and of course, social media. Please give your warmest welcome to Michael and the panel.
Thanks, Avery. Thanks to the Churchill Club, Karen, and everyone else for hosting. Thank you all for taking some time out of your busy schedules to meet with us, and thanks to our panelists for coming here to educate and entertain, I'm hopeful. Just in terms of what we're going to do today, I'm going to try to set the context a little bit in terms of some of the research that we've done, as well as some of the other things that we've discovered. Want to spend some time talking with the panel up here on stage, and then, as Avery suggested, we're going to have an opportunity for some of you to engage us. And then kind of something I like to do at the very end is do a little lightning round. It's a little Jim Cramer type thing, where I'll ask a bunch of questions that we'll want some quick answers from the panel from. So that's what we'd like to do today, if you don't mind. I see some Jim Cramer negatives, but that's okay. We'll live with that. So with that being said, in the past 48 hours, there have been a number of different reports that have come out, a couple of earnings reports, which I will not address at all. And then MGI, the McKinsey Global Institute, issued a report on the impact of social media. And I'm just going to cover a few highlights because the thing is 160 pages long, and I am not going to talk for 4 hours. So Just a few things that we discovered as we did this research. First of all, I think a lot of people would say, why are you guys studying social? I mean, isn't that over? I mean, aren't we already in the negative phase about social? Our point of view is that not at all, that actually we're just at the very beginning of what's a multi-year trend. And just as one piece of illustration, if you look at, we did this analysis about in the past 100 years, all the ways in which people communicate, collaborate, consume media, et cetera. If you look at all the words that impinge upon your life during a day, despite all of this media that we have about social networks, et cetera, only about 5% of the words or 5% of the time that you spend, or that we spend collectively on average, is through social networks. And our point of view is that social is a feature, not a product. And so if you believe that social can be added to pretty much any type of human interaction which is digitally mediated, then there's a huge amount of additional upside just in terms of the usage, despite the fact that some social platforms have close to a billion users. There's still a lot of upside in terms of just user adoption and usage. But that being said, as part of McKinsey & Company, we actually wanted to look at value. How do you create value using social? And so we looked in 4 deep dive domains. We looked at consumer packaged goods. We looked at consumer financial industries. We looked at advanced manufacturing, and we looked at professional services, a wide swath of the economy, not the entire economy, maybe about 20% of the revenues in the economy, but that varied. Some are products, some are services, some are, some of them are consumer-facing, some of them are more B2B. And when we looked at all those, we try to understand at a very fine-grained level. We have this micro to macro methodology that we use. We want to look at hundreds of case studies and try to understand what is the potential for social to create value. When we actually looked across, that swath of the economy, just those 4 sectors, we saw the ability to create $900 billion to $1.3 trillion of annual value across the globe on just those 4 sectors. So, $1 trillion, that's decent, right? So we think that's real and a real potential. Now, that being said, that's not going to happen tomorrow. There are a lot of things that have to happen. But the other thing that we discovered, because we looked across the value chain all the way from product development through sales and marketing, customer service, et cetera, the other insight that we discovered as we analyzed this, if you take a look at all the ways in which you can create value through improved collaboration and communication within and across enterprises, that value potential is twice that of all the other ways in which social can create value. Right? So as important as consumer marketing is, deriving insight from sentiment analysis, being able to get messages out through social networks, et cetera, as much value as you can create there, again, 2/3 of all the potential that we found were through improving collaboration and communication within and across the enterprise. So that's kind of interesting. Now, that being said, it's going to be hard to do, right? That's not necessarily easy to do, but why do we believe there's some potential? Well, something like 13 hours of every knowledge worker's work week is spent in email. Does that sound right to anybody? Right? Probably more. Yeah, this crowd, of course, Bay Area, what can you say? Right? 20% of your time looking for information and gathering it, right? Another 15% maybe collaborating with people internally. Do we think that there's a whole bunch of organizational dark matter trapped within people's inboxes that if you actually communicated in a more social way that you could actually improve the productivity of these sorts of people? We think yes. But that being said, it's going to take some real transformations in organizations and culture, et cetera, in order for that to happen. So that's really quickly what's contained in some of the 160 pages that we have. So with that setting as the context, let me just do a quick introduction of our panel and get into the conversation. So Wendy, to my left here, is the VP of Social Media and Digital Communications at TD Bank Group, which is one of the largest banks actually in North America, based in Toronto, and over 2 decades of experience in corporate communications, amongst other things. BJ, to her left, is the founder and director of the Persuasive Technology Lab at Stanford University, which sounds like something we should all learn about. You run persuasion boot camps, which is even more powerful, and authored a book called Persuasive Technology, Using Computers to Change What We Think and Do. David Gutelius over there, is the chief scientist at Jive Software, which is an enterprise social company. You drive enterprise social graph strategy and technology innovation, and previously you've had a background in machine learning and artificial intelligence, something I've had a background in as well, and social computing at a somewhat well-known place called SRI. And then Clara Chui, at the far left over there, is the founder and CEO of Hearsay Social, another enterprise social company. You're on the board of some small coffee company called Starbucks, and also author of a best-selling book called The Facebook Era, Tapping Online Social Networks to Market, Sell, and Innovate. Did I just sell by mistake? I'm sorry, my bad. All right, great. Why don't we get into the conversation then? BJ, why don't we start with you? So you run the Persuasive Technologies Lab. We won't ask you to explain what that means exactly, but there's something to this social thing, right? I mean, for some reason, these are technologies which have been adopted faster than any other media in the world in history. So why is that? What's going on?
Well, something to the social, I think, is social is everything in some ways. I mean, as human beings, we're really wired to be pack animals. We're much more like dogs than cats. And yeah, I mean, I'm sorry for cat people out there. And our social world, what we perceive to be our social environment and our peers and whatnot, influence our behavior more than we imagine. And we like to think that we're independent thinkers and we make our own decisions, but the fact of the matter is that our social context really controls a lot of our behavior. And so in some ways, it's almost like, why did it take technology so long to get this social? It was almost like there's this weird blip in time where it wasn't social, and now we're finally back to who we are naturally. Now it changes how we behave and what we do in some ways that are not so great. But at the end of the day, we're very social. That's not a surprise to everybody. And from here on out, we will be using technologies that are social, whether we like it or not.
And what have you learned in the Persuasive Technology Lab that...
Wow.
Not everything, just the good
Wow.
stuff.
Well, I started the lab in the 1990s, and it's all about understanding how computing systems can be designed to change people's behaviors, what they think and do, in a good way mostly. Some people see that in a negative way. And so some of my students have gone on to do some pretty interesting things with that. And what we do mostly now is teach people how behavior works and how to design systems that influence people in ways that you want and in ways that help them as well. So it's that overlap between computing and persuasion. And when I first started doing the research on that in the mid-90s, people thought that was insane and crazy. And some people thought that was evil and I shouldn't be doing that. And, but the experiments after experiments showed that computers could influence you. And then commercially, things started happening. And then people got over that and said, wow, how do we create stuff like this?
Yeah. Clara, you founded a company and you studied another company that uses this social instinct and technology to persuade and do things. What is it that's compelling about this for business?
I think if we take a step back, we're witnessing a seismic shift in consumer online behavior where the proliferation of mobile devices and the increasing amount of time that people spend online is driving people less towards search and owned media, meaning that going directly to companies' websites or media websites, and more to a world of sharing and discovery where they're checking their Facebook feed, their Twitter feed, their LinkedIn feeds first. And the implication of that is that increasingly, to BJ's point, it's our friends that are influencing what we do. Increasingly, we are crowdsourcing what we read, what we buy, who we do business with, to the nodes in the social graph that we trust. And these are our friends, our family members, our colleagues, other entities that we choose to follow or subscribe to on these social media sites. And so that's why it's so significant, I mean, in general, but specific to any business that wants to maintain and grow mindshare.
So Wendy, you run social, basically, for a big business. Where are you seeing value?
Well, so many great opportunities. One of the things that we've done that's a little unique is we've enabled a social network within our company, which is about 85,000 employees, and it's an open, unmoderated social network where employees can set up communities to collaborate on wikis and blogs and forums, and they can share information and really say what they would like to say and use it in any way. So that might sound like a lot of risk, and particularly in banking, but we're seeing a lot of value. Right off the bat, I can tell you that a majority of the communities that employees set up are business focused. They're not wasting their time, which is one of the things people worry about. They're using it to capture knowledge. So forget about the emails, as you were just saying. It's such a great story. If you can share in a network and put all of the updates that you have in that place, you don't have to have that inbox being filled up. And say you're off on vacation in San Francisco, and you go back, you don't have that big long.
Here, by the way.
Yeah, I don't. I don't. I'm in Toronto, so I'm not in the office. But my updates will be, and the dialogue that happened will be in the community when I go back. So I mean, there's so much value and opportunity that starts to come out of that.
Is there anything that surprised you about where it was actually valuable?
You know, I think we had this notion that because in retail banking, you've got a lot of young employees in the branches. And so we had this notion that it was going to be the young people and that it wouldn't really matter in head office. And actually quite the opposite is true. Certainly the retail employees really do like it, and they like the access to head office and leaders and all of that. But what we really find is that the people who are in head office who are like really have to make decisions using a lot of different specialty functions, if you will, are finding that great value in being able to come together in a community and collaborate and share. So I mean, it makes sense now. Everything makes sense in social like a month later, but you know, when you think about it, it's all human behavior. But initially, we thought it would be more adopted more quickly with younger employees.
Oh, interesting. So, David, you supply, you know, a lot of companies with the social technologies. What usage patterns are you seeing, and what value patterns are you seeing? Where are you seeing people?
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, one thing that we see is the importance of local cultures, and culture really affecting not just usage and behavior patterns, but also how those communication technologies, these sharing technologies, are actually put into practice into kind of workflows that make sense for a particular customer, right? So you could have a kind of mixed bag of different features that get used in a certain way in, say, consumer retail customer. And you look at a financial services customer, you know, we've got a few, for instance, private banker communities, right? And their culture is quite different, and the way that they choose to not just communicate and signal to one another, but use certain kinds of features in ways we couldn't possibly design ourselves is really cool. Because what you do as, you know, as a technologist is you put out a bunch of possibilities for people. And really the magic happens when the humans come into the mix and start to actually change what you do, and of course what they do, hopefully. And that's where the value really comes in. So,
can you say more examples of how cultures are different that way, and how that's, you know, affected the way that the technology has been used?
Yeah, so go back to the private banker example. So a bunch of investment bankers in New York. We've got some very large customers in that sector. And all of them are they come to the table sort of very worried about what will happen, right? And so they kind of tiptoe into the water, and typically we see this sort of explosion in usage in terms of these small groups. They kind of self-form in an ad hoc way, and they start solving problems. Well, the way that bankers do this tends to be very hierarchical. So the way that they're signaling back and forth to one another is very deferential for those above you in sort of the food chain. And the way that you signal and work with peers is actually quite different.
By signaling what? It's the language that they use? Or?
It's a combination of the language that they use, but also how they use the tools themselves. Mm-hmm. So for instance, lots of private messaging going back and forth inside of those communities that may result in something more visible, maybe once it's cured a little bit more, versus something a little bit more chaotic, especially in consumer retail is as good an example as any other, where you might get sort of an internal product company and it's in a mess. I mean, their ideation process and their product development process, you know, often can be very, very chaotic, sometimes very violent in terms of what happens, creative destruction, you know. And the communication patterns that you see there are very different. And so the tool you preference there then is like activity streams and very much more along the lines of kind of Facebook types of things where everything is visible. Everybody is watching what everybody else is doing. And eventually something comes of that. And it's really cool when those things sort of self-emerge. But really, it's just fascinating to see how different these communities wind up being. I mean, we can, we often deploy the same sort of standard set of tools out, and we give the same kind of best practices advice, but that only goes so far. It's all about what the customer then does, what the humans then do with that technology, where they take it. That's the exciting stuff.
Claire, your business is in a number of different industries and now in a number of different countries. Are you also seeing differences in the way that it gets used and deployed, et cetera?
Yeah, it's so interesting. So Hearsay Social, we're also an enterprise software company, but instead of focusing on internal communities, we work with Fortune 500 companies that have large networks of salespeople or local stores. So insurance is a big vertical for us, financial services, real estate, retail chains and franchises, multi-level marketing. So anytime you have a strong global or national brand combined with these local nodes. And what we're finding is that whether it's the private banker or the insurance agent or the store manager or even the customer who's checking into Foursquare or Yelp on their mobile phone, there's a proliferation of these local pages on LinkedIn, Facebook, Foursquare, Twitter, YouTube, you name it. And a lot of chief marketing officers don't even know that these local pages exist, right? And so initially, Hearsay Social, one of our first products was Rogue Page Finder. And it was just indexing all of these so-called rogue pages and profiles and highlighting them for corporate. And there's all kinds of, not just brand risk, but regulatory implications. And then beyond that, now we help them manage it from a content perspective, analytics, and other aspects. But, but to the point that was raised earlier, absolutely, the way that 24-hour fitness on the retail side manages their local pages on Yelp and Facebook is very different than the way that the private bankers at a Wall Street firm manage their LinkedIn profiles. And yet, to your point, the underlying technology of hierarchy management, applying business rules across a large number of local pages, it's all the same. It's just these different use cases. And ultimately, because these organizations make money in very different ways and have different kinds of customer relationships, transaction sizes and transaction frequencies, all of that gets reflected in the way that the tools are used.
So BJ, I'm curious, all the other panelists have mentioned things that, have alluded to things that might go wrong. Wow. So not to bring things down, but, in your, experience, what are some of the things that end up, being an obstacle that don't work?
Yeah. Wow, where should I go with this? How many people have had a disaster on Twitter? You posted something, you're like, oh my gosh, seriously? Am I the only one? Come on, panelists, no?
Minor disaster, yeah.
It seems like I have like one a week. But maybe that's just lately. And I had a pretty bad one 2 weeks ago. And I think I won't explain it because, I shouldn't even have said that. Now you're going to look it up. Yeah.
Wait, but how many people here are even on Twitter?
Okay. Okay, get on Twitter. Okay, you are. Okay. Take more risks, people. Anyway. At the beginning, I was actually sort of tracking, and I was deleting 20% of everything I tweeted. Now I'm like, whatever. It's just going to get buried under, hopefully, something. The thing is, social technologies make social interactions easier to do, and that's part of what makes them great. And they can scale, and that's part of what makes them great. And it's kind of permanent, and that's kind of what makes them both great and terrible. So all those things, easier to say something fast, and it scales. You go, oh, I'm going to tweet this, come back after, and it's like, oh my gosh, it got totally retweeted, they misinterpreted me, and it's out there, and you just can't really recall it. So the same things, it's like, wow, we're capturing knowledge, and they're sharing, and people can go back and see it later. That's also some of the downsides. And I'm not exactly sure what the answer is to some of those things, and I can't believe you guys aren't just, you're not confessing. You will have disasters on Twitter and other places. Maybe not. Maybe you have better judgment than I do.
So there's a set of things that can go wrong in terms of things spiraling out of control. Are there also a set of things that, you just don't achieve a critical mass? And how do you deal with that?
I don't look so much about deployment inside enterprise. I'm more on the consumer side of things.
But on the consumer
But
side.
what I do know, because I'm doing a lot more work in health and helping people design health programs, wellness programs inside, and there's a real suspicion in some companies where the employees are like, who are you, boss people, you know, executive managers, to tell me what I should be doing in my home and what da-da-da-da-da. So that's still an unsolved problem for some companies. You know, how do you convey genuine, that you really want them to be healthier, just for their benefit and also for the bottom line. And it's a problem that people are still working on.
When it's been solved, how did you solve it?
Well, what I do is I teach the key thing. One of the key things is it's not about technology anymore. And the Persuasive Technology Lab really was like, isn't it fascinating that technology can influence you? And that's no longer fascinating. That's ordinary. So the thing that is missing is clear thinking about behavior and how behavior works. And so what companies almost always, whether it's a startup or a larger company, what they don't do cleanly is say, here's the behavior we want. Boom. They'll say, we want engagement, or we're doing a campaign. And I'm like, yeah, that's fine, but what behavior do you want? So part of the first steps to achieve success is, what is it that you want people to do? Do you want them to answer a survey? Do you want them to join a challenge, issue a challenge, and so on? There are some grassroots systems that help solve that, so people feel like they're deciding what they're doing with their peers rather than it being directed to them.
So Wendy, when I think about industries that worry about risk, banks come up occasionally. Can you talk about, you know, how there are things that people worry about? So what do you worry about at the bank, and how have you addressed those?
What I worry about is not enough social, but what some of the bankers worry about is definitely, you know, customer privacy, absolutely paramount. Cannot cross that line, and that line, you know, I think is very fine. And so if you're going to respond to someone who has an issue and you've found them and they haven't actually proactively come to you, then that could be considered. Is that an invasion of their privacy? But anyways, they don't worry so much about that. They worry about the customer data and their account information. And as well, you know, we're a large publicly traded company, so we worry about our employees and what's sharing confidential information about the company, so customers and company information. You know, I think initially there's also that question internally about productivity. You know, will employees, you know, waste their time chatting about, you know, The Bachelorette or whatever.
For instance.
But that doesn't really happen, and what we definitely find is two things. We trust our employees to talk to customers in branches and on the phone by the thousands every single day. So we can actually trust them to talk to each other every single day on our internal social network. Like, it's, you know, and you know, that's kind of a deep tradition at TD. We've always kind of encouraged our employees to speak, so it isn't like we turned on internal social networking and then suddenly the culture became one of transparency and sharing. That was a culture that we've now amplified using social. But there's, you know, people worry about risks all the time, and I think the way that I've approached it in the company is to try to say, okay, what are the real risks associated with social? Business has risk, you know, even though we're bankers and we're risk averse. Any business, you're going to take a risk or you're not going to get anywhere. So, you know, what are the ones that we're taking on because we're getting involved in social that are different and unique? Let's understand what those are, and then, you know, let's either choose to put mitigations or constrain our implementation against those particular ones. And when you really do that, you find that there's already risk. I mean, people can come in, you know, they could lose their laptop and lose all kinds of data. They could go set up a Facebook group and, you know, share all kinds of info. You know, when you really get down to it, the risks are quite small, and you have to be very careful, and to me it's about customer information and data.
Clara, I'm interested because your company sort of fits, you know, in between consumers and the enterprise, et cetera. Which population is harder?
I don't know about harder. I mean, I think they're two sides of the same coin. And it's because there's a billion users on social media sites, social networking sites, that precisely makes it so appealing for businesses across various industries. I mean, just to add to Wendy's point, I mean, it's ultimately about what is the value that you can create on both sides. I mean, consumers know that they're giving up privacy when they add all this information on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, but there's a reason they do it. They do it because they get value back. The value they get back is the ability to connect more deeply with their friends, to stay in touch with their family members and colleagues, even when they're in remote areas. It's the ability to express themselves and say, yes, I like this brand, or yes, I follow this particular celebrity. The same thing is true on the brand side. There are risks, but to Wendy's point, the optimal level of risk for businesses or for in general is rarely zero. And so what are they getting in exchange for the risk, and how do they mitigate those risks? And typically, you know, that's the billion-dollar or the trillion-dollar question, which I agree with you, Michael. We're only just scratching the surface of unlocking the tremendous value creation on the social graph. I mean, today we're talking about brand advertising, that is upper funnel, upper marketing funnel types of activities, but actually, if you understand human behavior, both within and external to the company firewall, there's a lot of transactions and communications and collaboration to be done across, you know, marketing, sales, customer service, and reaching into the back office.
So that's super intriguing, right? So what would it mean to be farther down in the funnel rather than in the big part of it?
Well, you know, you start with awareness, and so, you know, a lot of people talk about how GM pulled their ad campaigns from Facebook the week before the IPO. And, you know, of course, if you compare brand ads, whether it's on social media or some other medium, to search, you're never going to get the same results because it's apples versus oranges. You know, you're comparing someone who does not have search intent or purchase intent to someone who's actually searching for a car or searching for a GM vehicle. So, of course, there's going to be a much higher click-through. So I think what's going to happen is that over time, social is going to get closer to the transaction. A lot of our customers do this by, you know, marrying social data with driving the productivity of their salespeople and driving store visits, driving bigger transactions. But certainly that's happening on e-commerce. And there's also no reason why social couldn't converge with search. I mean, today those are two separate worlds. You live in social media and then you separately search, usually on Google. But why shouldn't those two be together? Why shouldn't we live in a world where if I search for a digital camera, I'll get a very different set of search results than my 11-year-old niece who loves pink and loves Hello Kitty and has hopefully less money than me, it's a lower price point, versus my husband's cousin who is a professional photographer. If he searches for digital camera, why shouldn't he see an ad that's a professional camera just for him? All of that data is out there, and as long as we can figure out the privacy issues that Wendy talked about, that's a better experience on both sides because it's higher conversion and it's also more targeted and relevant for the consumer. And I think that gets us closer to the holy grail of marketing, which has always been to deliver the right message to the right person at the right time.
And by the way, search on social platforms seems to be horrible. Does anyone else find that to be true?
Yeah. We have a long way to go.
David, I'm curious. I mean, this idea of measurement has come up, right? Which is, you know, how do you find out that actually you are capturing value? Are you finding anything? You're the chief scientist, after all. So.
Yeah. Now the burden's
after
on me
all,
to prove it. Huh?
Yeah, that made it sound a little too.
So yeah, I think we've certainly come a long way in terms of being able to measure the effect on, say, things like productivity, how fast things get done, tasks get completed. Some measures are easier to observe than others. So, you know, for instance, one of our big customers, T-Mobile, you know, found using Jive, kind of discovered these use cases themselves, but you know, found they could cut their time to issue resolution by using this particular approach to problem solving, social problem solving in a sense, you know, by a factor of something like 10. And it was literally, the CEO told us, you know, millions of dollars a year, just that one use case. Other things are much harder to measure, right? So in terms of, you know, people often try to make this argument email versus something social. well, what they're doing on social is not necessarily any better than what they did on email. So just the fact that they're switching tools or channels to do things doesn't necessarily tell us very much. We actually need more information to be able to say something substantive about change over time. And so what we're trying to do at Jive is build up a sort of set of use cases, both on the external side. So about half of our business is serving companies like Apple and Nike on their external communities. And then half of business is sort of internal collaboration. So you can imagine different ways of measuring value in those different kinds of settings. And I think we're actually pushing the envelope in some pretty interesting ways. I was just discussing at dinner earlier some of the fairly minor breakthrough we had this week with the data science group, and being able to sense meaningful clusters of activity inside of a community and starting to interpret what those clusters and the emergence of those clusters over time could mean for whether it's a Nike or a T-Mobile in terms of internal collaboration could mean for dollar value.
So can you say, what does that mean? What are meaningful clusters?
Yeah, so what we see is that, if you could imagine over time, oftentimes a pattern you see in more successful communities is you have little clusters of people. Everyone doesn't rush in at once and everything is suddenly beautiful. It's usually, and Wendy can probably attest to this kind of process that you go through. And every company takes a different journey to that point. And so, as a vendor, what we would like to do is help people get up that value curve as quickly as possible. One way to do that is to sense when something interesting is beginning to happen. So as human beings, we need models, it turns out. We need people to follow. We need to figure out how to use tools. We need to figure out sort of the cultural norms in any community. And a lot of these communities, again, whether it's external or internal, is about watching what other people do and asking ourselves, is this a place where I can imagine myself giving of myself, trusting what's going on here, building a sort of online identity inside this new place. And so being able to sense when signaling patterns, whether it's linguistic or in the types of activity people are undertaking, those combinations of patterns tell us something about how much people trust what's going on there and whether or not they will be likely to come back and do more. And so we're beginning to build a sort of library of probabilities where we see a certain pattern forming. We have a sense that this is either sort of moving in the right direction or maybe moving in the wrong direction. And it's fascinating as a social scientist, fascinating to see some of these things emerge in ways that, again, are pretty unpredictable in some ways. And the people vote with their feet. So they tell us exactly what they think is valuable in the community, through the data.
But there's also, and I'm not saying Jive does this, but technology can give sort of a social reality distortion. And let me give an example. When you go over to Facebook and you look at your feed, you see entries and posts from people who are active on Facebook. So say you have 800 friends on Facebook. Let's say only 150 are really active. You're not thinking of the 650 who didn't post, and you're not thinking of the 200 have completely dropped off. So by clever design, Facebook and other solutions will give you the impression that all your friends are really active and posting, and they're disclosing lots of information, and they're participating, and so on. And that's kind of it's a distortion of reality, but it changes how you think about your social world, and it gets you to behave differently.
So how do you deal with that distortion, or should
well,
we deal with that?
If you're a product creator, you want to create for that, right? I mean, if the behavior is, we want people to post, to comment, you model that. And you highlight the people who are doing that, and you don't say, oh, here are your 400 friends that haven't been back here in 4 weeks.
Yeah. So I think this is what I see as a real difference between the consumer space and trying to serve an enterprise market with some of the same kinds of technologies, social technologies. Where on the enterprise side, we actually really have to care about not just the volume of stuff being shoved at people, but ask ourselves, and hope our customers will tell us, are they getting the right things? Are they actually using those tools to become productive and not just Facebook for the enterprise, or again, whether it's external or internal? We want to show activity, yes, but it has to be the right activity.
Well,
it's got to be the meaningful activity, or else we're failing.
Or accurate. So let me give another example that was new to me. So I ran a boot camp last week, and one of the people that came was an MD working on communities and people dealing with cancer. And his point, and I didn't get this, but it fits the pattern, was when you have these online communities and people sharing with each other how they're dealing with cancer, so whatever chronic disease, the people that are posting and most active are not representative of all those types of patients.
Right.
And the people that are most critical are not online posting, and so it gives kind of a distorted piece of information. So one of the things he's trying to figure out is how do you balance that back out?
Yeah.
Because unlike Facebook, where it's kind of sort of trivial, it's pretty important when it comes, you've got cancer and you're trying to decide on what is the right treatment.
Yeah.
But ultimately, in any type of community, and I think this is true, although I don't have the data on offline, in-person worlds versus online, is you see this pyramid of engagement where at the bottom of the pyramid you have most of the people are lurkers. They're just going there. 70% of people on Twitter have never tweeted more than once. So they're just following other people. They're content consumers, not content producers. And that's okay.
Yeah,
and that as you go up, there's people who they're the likers and they're the commenters. They're not usually, or they're the retweeters. They're not originating net new content, but maybe they're curating and kind of adding their 2 cents. And then at the top of the pyramid, the fewest number of people are the ones who are creating. And I think that's just kind of nature. But maybe there are ways that you can persuade the top to be a little bit bigger, or move people up that chain and encourage the people who are talking a lot to maybe talk a little bit less and yield to other people. That would be interesting to see. But those dynamics happen, at a cocktail party too. There's always that guy or that girl who's dominating the conversation, and there's some people who they're wallflowers or they tend to listen. They're still valuable parts of the community.
Yeah. Wendy, do you see any social distortion fields happening within the bank?
It gets talked about a lot. We originally started our social journey just by commenting on news articles, and definitely that was one of the executive pushbacks. Well, it's only the, whatever, call them the naysayers, the this people, the that people who are commenting. So we did some experimentation, like running focus groups with like representative groups, just to balance that out and say, well, is this true? Is this reflective? And generally, we found it was reflective. I don't know about in cancer research, but in terms of people's opinions on policies and dialogues that we were having, it seemed to be reflective. But I think it's really what Clara said is so true. I mean, probably even in this room, there would be a few people who will ask questions, and many people that will participate by learning and being part of this conversation. And so I think it's true that in real human behavior, not everybody is a contributor.
Is that self-selection bias, to the extent to which there is one, is that problematic? Right, that there is this top of the pyramid, I guess.
The 1%. Is it a problem at a cocktail party? I mean, that's kind of how humans behave. Some people are louder and other people are quieter, and that's great. I mean, you need that diversity in the sort of the crowd, or else everybody's just talking at the same time and nobody's listening.
I've been at cocktail parties like that. Not fun. Remember that one.
Let me come back to, David, a point that you made before, and I'm curious if people on the panel have had a solution to it. I mean, one of the things that we identified in our research is a technology problem, which is how do you, if there's this torrent of information that's being made social, how do you make sure that the user gets what is relevant to them, right? And so I'm wondering if anyone has any ideas there.
That's really something that actually our head of data science is here too, Greg. We've done a lot of analysis in terms of, from a business value perspective, what are the updates and who are the people that you care about? And it's different than the social graph that you care about, when you're home or when you're not thinking about work. And so, what we've done algorithmically is the engineering team has developed these ways to identify important events that are usually triggers for our customers. And it's different by different verticals, but I'll just talk specifically about insurance and financial services. It turns out that a lot of the life updates that people share on the social networks, whether it's moving to a new city, having a child, getting married, getting a new job, that is like precisely, it's a gold mine for anyone who's a private banker, insurance agent, or realtor. Right? And so we've been able to figure out algorithmically, how do we bubble up those updates and notify the agent or the private banker, whomever it is, so that if they can only have 5 business lunches in a week and if they can only have 10 calls in a certain day, how do they make sure that they're calling on the right people at the right time? And so just driving that productivity up so that it's just a higher ROI.
Wendy, are there any techniques that you use to make sure that the people get the right information at the right time?
Yeah, and we're actually finding that it's helping get the right information internally. So a great example is so we're right across Canada, so I'll talk about Canada for a second, and each part of Canada would be divided into a district, and you'd have a district manager. And that manager, he wouldn't be able to get to all of his branches. He probably has 20 branches. He's going to get into them maybe once a month. Also, in going across Canada are wonderful people who are kind of the sales leaders for the various products. And what they want is shelf space in the minds of all of our retail employees. So the traditional way is that they pump out emails. And so now, how many products do we have? A lot. So how many of these sales leaders do we have? A lot. And so your email bin, if you're a poor retail person trying to serve customers, it could be like 40 emails. And how do you choose what to pay attention to in that world? It's not easy, and generally the answer is you don't, right? You don't. Everybody's the same, right? You paid attention to the 3 that were at the top of the inbox, and the rest went down, and you served your customers, and you went on with your day. So now what sales leaders are doing is they tell all of the district manager is doing is tells all the sales leaders, use the community. You got something to say to my people. You're going to put it in the community. I'm going to comment on the ones that I think are the most relevant, and I'm going to recommend the ones that I think are most relevant. And he's got all of his branches now using that as a place to curate the information and areas of focus. So first of all, he's saying that saves his people time because some of them might have been going through all those emails. But more importantly, he's in control of the information and the areas of focus of his people. So that's, I think, a phenomenal use case. And I think my biggest challenge right now is how can I get every single one of those managers doing it? Because it's, we're getting these great cases coming up, but we need to get it out more into more people doing that kind of behavior.
You bring up the idea of leadership here, right? And these are social technologies after all. So I don't know, BJ, do you want to talk about what does leadership mean in a social technology world?
I'll take that question and twist it around a little bit. I think it means let's take a setting of a meeting. How many of our meetings have been less than good because people are using social technologies during the meeting face-to-face? In my class at Stanford, I guess I show leadership. The students aren't happy with this necessarily, but I'm making sure they get their money's worth. It's no laptops. You close them during class, and during the break you can open them, and no phones. You listen, and we need to take notes. No, just learn it, right? You guys are smart. You can learn this stuff. So I think maybe somebody solved this, but I haven't heard of it. We need to develop sort of a set of principles or practices so our productivity with old-fashioned kinds of things like face-to-face meetings doesn't get wasted. Okay, let's do this experiment. How many of you, I know, this could totally fail. Sorry, Michael. In the last, 20, 30 minutes we've been talking, how many of you have actually not been fully, no, don't raise your hand yet. Okay, good. We have a very honest person in the crowd. How many of you, it's like with technology, we'll do the little, okay, here's what we'll do. Because I'm really good at keeping confidences. We'll have everybody close your eyes briefly and then raise your hand if you actually checked email or did Facebook or did something non-relevant to this moment. Panelists, close your eyes, turn off the TV cameras, ready, go. How many people checked out? Okay, put your hands down. Okay, panelists, what do you think? 20, 30%? Okay. It's sort of like with these technologies, and I don't know exactly what the solution is, you're never fully away from work or away from the family, but you're never fully present at work or present with the family. And it's this really kind of weird new limbo state that we don't have a way to deal with yet, or a graceful way.
I'm curious, what does the rest of the panel think? On an individual basis, the use of this stuff.
I turn off my phone and my laptop when I go on vacation. I am off grid.
I try to, and the first 24 to 48 hours is really hard because you think about it, you reach for it, and then after that, it's good. I think BJ is absolutely right, and in many ways, smartphones are to blame. First, there's a reason why they called it the crackberry, is because it's so gratifying. There's always an email there waiting for you. And now Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn with Newsfeed, which we take for granted now, but that was a revolutionary new feature when Facebook introduced it in 2005. Those of you who were on Facebook back then may recall millions of people quit Facebook because they felt like it was this huge invasion of privacy, that whatever activities they were doing on Facebook would be automatically broadcast to their friends. And yet now it's become, all those people have signed back up, and yet it's now become a core feature of a lot of applications. But the ramification of that is that it's even more gratifying because every single time you open your phone, there's going to be something new from somebody somewhere in the world.
Slot machine psychology.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
That's what's going on.
Yeah.
Which is what you teach at the Persuasive Technology Lab, as I can tell.
That's what they really do.
Wendy, any thoughts on a personal level? How do you deal with this stuff?
Well, I'm a little bit addicted to the whole space. I don't actually mind using my BlackBerry, and we have to use BlackBerries because it's a bank and all that. But I don't mind using it. I keep in contact most of the time. My role, it's a bit of a new role, so I do have accountability for implementing these things, but I also have accountability for all the operations. So, you said the Twitter crisis. Well, I personally haven't had one, but I've dealt with many, even this week. So, you kind of have to be on it. Kind of goes with the space. I don't mind it, but to your point about not being fully there, I do think that is definitely a challenge from a personal point of view, but I think it's a great opportunity from a marketing point of view. So how do you, if we're watching television, and in the past we just run our 30-second spot, now how do you incorporate some social element and be part of the experience with the consumer? So those are really interesting things to think about from the marketing point of view.
So I think this is a perfect point now that we've actually started some audience interaction to invite some questions. So there are at least a couple of mics available for people to make BJ close his eyes. Please go ahead.
Okay. So I'm marketing side, print, demographics, trying to get the psychographics, social media, no demographics, no psychographics, a lot of noise out there. How do we know who we're communicating with? It's a lot cheaper, I give you that, but I don't know who I'm communicating with. Yeah, there's a community, but a community of who?
I would disagree. I think, let me first just say that social networking is distinct from social media. Social media, blogs, communities, wikis, YouTube, they all existed before social networking, and you're right, it was hard to know who you were communicating with because largely the users were anonymous. They would sign up for a profile, but it was John Doe 82 or Bunny 772. You didn't really know who these people were. Social networking is very different. Social networking, the social graph, is built upon the notion of online identity. That was what made Facebook so different than every website before, and then subsequently LinkedIn and Twitter. You sign up as a real person, and there's an etiquette that's implicit in the network. There's a culture where you ought to only initiate and accept friend requests from people that you actually know offline. And so there's a lot of demographic and psychographic information on Facebook. In fact, that's how Facebook and more recently LinkedIn, that's how they monetize, is that they have an advertising platform where, because they have so much profile information about who you are, where you're from, where you went to school, what you studied, what your job is, your age, your favorite books and movies, all of the brands and organizations and politicians that you like, your religious views, your sexual orientation. Basically, this is like the Facebook profile creation wizard. They extract all of this information from you. And what happens is advertisers, anyone can go to facebook.com/ads. What you can do is you can create what they call a hyper-targeted campaign against as narrow or as broad of an audience profile as you want. So I'll give you an example. If you are a golf store, you can create ads and target them specifically to people who are aged 25 to 45, who live in San Francisco or within 20-mile radius, who are male and who belong to a certain country club, and oh, by the way, that they have expressed on their profile as part of their identity that they love to golf. And you can target their friends. And so that's actually really powerful, and that's something that marketers could never do before. So I think maybe traditional social media, you didn't know who you were dealing with, but we're entering an era now, and why so many marketers are excited is because there is all this customer data that you can target, or what they call hyper-target against.
I love that, but they don't have that on me at all.
Well, they have that on 1 billion people, so.
Well, but let's. I
That's
actually, as a big data guy, I can tell you that they actually don't have that data on 1 billion people. And the data quality is, I think what you're hearing is there's a certain level of frustration with the quality of data that you get out of these systems. And, it's true to a certain degree. We all sort of lie on our online profiles, even if we don't mean to. On the other hand, big data gives you the ability to infer a whole bunch more than we ever could before through, filling out forms about ourselves. And that's actually the scary part from a technology standpoint.
That's true. It's big data, and I guess it's not like we lie. Just to add to that, I agree. I think it's a lot of what people share on their profiles is aspirational. That's how they want to
You're
be
marketing,
branded.
aren't you?
They want their friends or the girl or guy that they want to date to view them that way. And so there is an interesting, there's interesting data there that also can be mined. And maybe it's not directly targeting someone who says that they like golf, because those people don't actually golf. It's through some other correlative means.
Right. Yeah, how many people have put on their status update, it's a really boring day? Anyway. Next question. Oh, sorry. I will.
Okay. I forget which one of you said it, but you said that the social media is really deepening people's relationships, and I have to take issue with that. I think it's in shallowing people's relationships, broadening them out, but not making them any deeper. And I'm wondering, I forget which one of you commented on that, but whichever one of you would like to comment on that. I see my relationships, especially online, as being much less deep than they are in person, and much less deep than they are over email, but they're much broader. I hear a lot more from a lot more people, but not necessarily stuff I want to know.
Well, not only that, and I'll take it one step further. The quality of your best relationships is getting worse, and you're managing 800 loose ties. So you're managing a bunch of loose relationships at the expense of the relationships that matter most. Yeah.
I'd agree with that.
No. Because I don't think our capacity as humans is increasing that much to really, connect with the 3 or 4 people who are really important, and then also have, with all of these things, like the advantages, if you look at the underside, and I like that the report's about value creation and not value destruction. It's kind of fun to do the hand-wringing and that kind of thing, but there's value creation too. But yeah, I think you're exactly right, and I think it's just like making those rules about meetings and social media, that I think we will get smarter in the future and understand, and hopefully the technology will help us to prioritize relationships and to enrich the ones that really matter. And I guess I'll say this, in the last 2 weeks I've been going through and unfriending, so my feed gets better tuned. They took away some of the tuning features.
That's why you unfriended.
Sorry. If I unfriend you, it's not that you don't matter, you just don't matter as much, I guess. See, Twitter disaster.
I'm not sure I feel any better.
You can create a disaster even in real life. It's great here.
I'll tell you, I guess A slightly different variant of that. It's everything both of you said I agree with. The interesting thing I've seen in my own network is, yes, it's about these broader, shallower relationships. I've actually weirdly developed quite close ties with people I couldn't have met any other way. And I'm not sure how universal that experience is necessarily. I'm a much heavier Twitter user, for instance, than I am Facebook. The people that I generally interact with on Twitter are peers, colleagues. It's a pretty professional network. Facebook tends to be more sort of personal friends, people I know in my personal life. So those are sort of bifurcated in a way. And I'll tell you, the people that I've met professionally through that other kind of social network, it's been astounding. As someone who's tries to keep up in their field and does whatever he can to do that, it winds up being a great way to do that, sort of keep in touch in a lightweight way with how people are thinking in that network I care about. And then again, I have these experiences where I actually develop very close relationships with a few key people in that network, and that wouldn't have been possible 3 years ago.
So do you do that all through Twitter, or do you find that once you start developing a relationship at a certain level, you move off of that platform?
Move off of it as quickly as possible. Absolutely. I mean, we obviously continue that lightweight channel, but it's all about developing the human relationship. It's actually a combination. It's a combination of things, yeah.
Just to offer a slightly different perspective, I think it all depends on how you use the technology. I mean, sure, if you have 5,000 friends on Facebook, it's going to be very dilutive. But if you're more selective or you use friend lists, like that's like a kind of an advanced tip. Like my closest friends, I add onto a Facebook friend list. And so when I log in my stream, that's what I click first so that I'm seeing their updates. And then sometimes if I'm bored, then I'll look at everybody else that Facebook pushes to me. But for just speaking personally, my relationship with my mom has gotten much closer. She lives in Chicago. For whatever reason, that 2-hour difference is just enough that we don't get to talk quite as often as possible. I don't really have time or think to upload photos and email them to her, but I'll put them on Facebook and she'll interact with them, and it's been great. It's really been additive versus a replacement to the kinds of typical interactions that she and I have.
Next question.
Yeah, a very interesting discussion, so thank you. We've talked about the internal collaboration, and we've talked about external collaboration. I'm just curious on your thoughts or experience in connecting the two, because I think most organizations today are very client-focused, and yet so much of the internal organization doesn't have the opportunity to have that interface.
Yeah, that's cool.
I think that's what I'm thinking about. That's what we're thinking about. That's once you see the power of the internal collaboration, first of all, the walls start to come down. So if I'm in marketing, I'm using advertising agencies and social agencies and all sorts of, so right away, my network for whatever project I'm on isn't big enough. I need to be able to bring in those vendors. So how do we do that, and how do we do that in a secure and safe way? And then in terms of collaborating with customers, we're seeing that, so we're definitely doing customer care. So you have a problem, you can tweet us. But what we're seeing is that there's lots of forums and blogs and places where people can go to get advice, but not a lot of those are credible. In other words, you don't know the expertise of the person that's giving you advice. So what we're experimenting with, and I mean, this is only a few months old and we're just learning, but we're experimenting with having an expert community on our .com so that customers can come in, they'll ask their questions about whatever financial matter they have. We have experts that are actual product experts there. They'll join in the conversation, but we're also having the community, whoever they are, joining in, and they're offering their advice. But at least first of all, it's credible because it's not just the bank talking and providing one set of views, but that is an expert opinion, and then you're allowing other people and other customers. The interesting thing that we weren't expecting with this is that because it's so real time, it's very often market event based or situational context based. What's happening is those same questions are being asked of our people in the branches. And what we're starting to see now is employees in the branches looking at this online community to see what questions are being asked, and then seeing that expert answer and being in real time ready and equipped to answer those questions in real time. So there's a real convergence of all of these internal, external, and then partner relationships that are possible. It's very exciting.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, there's so much crossover, and that's good because those are efficiencies. I mean, there's certain risks that are introduced, but those can be worked through. I mean, just looking at the organizations that we work with, because of their distributed nature, from the very beginning, our software has had to enable crossover workflows where, yes, we're enabling the local store page or the local insurance agent to talk through their customer, but sometimes those interactions have to get routed internally to compliance or legal for review. Or sometimes the content that they're posting in the first place, some sort of viral video or a white paper, that's not something that the local user has time to create. It's something that's centrally created by marketing or by a research division, and then there's a workflow around suggesting that content to a content library that a local user can access. And so we see that all of the time, and then the key is, I guess, figuring out how to make that workflow as seamless as possible while adhering to either firm policy or etiquette or the different cultures and rules and regulations that would apply to internal versus external communications.
Yeah, we see the same thing at Jive. One of the coolest things that I'm seeing over the past probably 2 years is this growing notion of co-creation. So product teams actually creating new products with customers and getting into not just a dialogue about, here's some ideas you can throw out, but actually an active project together and creating whole new products out of that process. Nike is a great example of that. A lot of the newest kind of quantified self types of technologies came out of those kind of co-creation sessions with actual consumers.
Can you say more about what that means to the non-geeky people?
Quantified self?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Nike Plus was probably the first, I think, version of this. Little thing, device that fits in your shoe and tracks everywhere you go. Fitbit has a little wristband. Nike now has a wristband. There are lots of these little wristbands you can wear. And basically, they pick up, they're sensor devices. They pick up, pulse rate and various other vitals. And then, best of them, Bluetooth that out to a wireless router where you can save that information, chart it. It's very cool. But the twist with Nike is actually nice because you can compare your stats with others and compete and do all these things. So from a persuasive technology standpoint, it's pretty cool.
And just to share another completely different example of that, I was just thinking, at our company, we do a lot of our internal collaboration through a wiki, and each employee has a wiki user profile. And so for the longest time, our poor HR team begged every single person in the company to fill out their profile, upload a picture, write about their hobbies, because we wanted our employees to get to know each other. And it was a losing battle, because for whatever reason, people just did not want to go through this process, even though you would think that everyone would want to get to know each other. It was just this added step. And so what we decided to experiment with was we said, look, all of our employees are on Facebook, and they have very vibrant profiles, and maybe there's, hopefully they'd want to share it with their colleagues. Maybe there's pieces that they don't, and they can adjust the privacy settings as such. And so what we did was we created a private Facebook group, and that's become our internal company collaboration, communication. Here we're playing basketball. Here's a great article that we read. There's different threads and forks. People can comment and like, and they can click through to see their colleagues' Facebook profiles and really get to know these people. And as those get updated in real time, their colleagues can see that. And it's become very vibrant. I'd say over 90% of our employees, right, Greg? 90% of our employees, at least, are on those sites. And it's been especially important for remote employees who we don't see face-to-face every day.
Right.
And you don't have any more reply to all emails.
Right. That was a huge problem for us.
Next question.
Hi, good evening. My name is Andrew Scott, and I run a startup called Tabloid. Traditionally, LinkedIn has been for business, and Facebook's been for personal. But maybe it's just because I work in tech, but I've seen this collision between my business life and my personal life, where I've got sort of VCs on my Facebook friends. And my own friends seem to be polarized between those that have got their Facebook in lockdown and those that have just given up and adopted this sort of approach of radical transparency. What does the panel think about Facebook and how social is affecting, is it affecting a real change in society about the approach to work and transparency, or is it just reflecting the existing fact that some people are more open and some people like to keep things very private?
Well, from a scientific perspective, I'm not sure there's any way to do an experiment and really know the long-term answer to that. And it's a good question. From kind of a practical, sitting around the coffee table talking perspective, the social technologies have different cultures to them and different uses. And just to kind of summarize Facebook, Facebook is all about making yourself look good. And it is. And if you're trying to get something done on Facebook, like manage a chronic illness or blah, if it doesn't make people look good, they're not doing it on Facebook. There's another social technology that may be better for that. So it's just, I think one of the realities of human nature is you want to look good to your peers, you want to boost your status. Facebook has that culture very strongly. Now, and I think there's been some, I can't cite the research, but I seem to recall research that says it's depressing for people to look at all their friends are on all these great vacations doing all these cool things and they're locked in this cubicle slaving away. It's like I have the lamest life of all my friends. So I don't know where it's going to go, and culture will change somehow, but I don't know how you would predict that accurately. I don't know how you do a true experiment to know. Andrew, I don't know if I answered that question. Maybe other people can do a better job.
You bring up a good point. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg says all the time he believes that our various identities are converging. And I think in some industries and for some demographics that's true, like in technology, for example. I think at our company, most people, it's not that they've given up, it's that they want to share their authentic selves with others. The challenge I have with that is for people who work in highly regulated industries or in sensitive professions, like if you're, you work as a parole officer or you're a psychiatrist or you're a police officer. I mean, there's certain people who can't do that. And so how does this new web technology culture dovetail with their lives? And then the other breakage point that I see is with kids. I think, growing up, all of us do crazy things and, we say crazy things and then people forget about them and it's okay. But we're entering a world now where every single thing is captured, and it's captured for permanently. So people can't really make a mistake, and that's not fair to kids. And I don't know. Does it mean that you just not let them go on Facebook? Maybe. I know some parents who are that way. Do you just coach them to never make a mistake? I mean, that's no way to grow up either, and that's something that concerns me personally.
Next question.
Hi, thanks for the panel. Really interesting. I'm Dave Larker from Stanford. Before I ask the question, let me say I completely buy into social media. I completely buy into the prospects and things like that. I guess what I'm curious about, are there any really good examples where it's clear that value has been created, where you actually look at, show me the real cash flows that came out of this, do the financial analysis, and I've done a lot of this work in market research and things like that. It's incredibly difficult to nail down, non-core areas where, the systems are just not in place to actually track. You don't know if the customer came in through word of mouth because they're neighbors or whatever. But I'm curious, particularly when you try to sell the idea to people that are, 60s, 70s, where their primary instrument of communication when they went to college was the typewriter, and now you're scaring them to death about social media. There's a lot of prospects. They're going to ultimately, the CFO, CEO, board members are going to ask, show me the value. And I guess I'm curious, are there real, again, I buy into the whole idea, but ultimately, in a corporation, there's a, show me the cash flow effects of these things. Could you put a little color around that? Thank you.
That's a great question, and it's something that Greg's data team spends a lot of time analyzing for our customers, usually for their CFOs. And it depends on the kind of business that you're in. So the easiest way to calculate ROI is when it's an e-commerce transaction that originates directly from a Facebook page or Facebook ad, right? That's obvious. You can look at the click-through rates, you can look at the conversion, and calculate it down to the dollars and cents, and you know that it originated there, and then it's click to close. The second easiest way is when you can, if it's an offline transaction, drive in-store behavior or drive bigger purchases, and you can do this through deals, you can do this through promotions that you then link back to that person in that particular ad or post on their Facebook page. And we do that. The hardest is with some of our customers where it's a very long sales cycle, and social media, as much of a role as it plays, is usually only part of the story. And financial services is classic, right? You're never going to, well, not never, I shouldn't say, but most people will not hand over $5 million of their net worth to a financial advisor that they've never met in person, even if they might meet that, even if they discover that person from social media initially. Same thing for life insurance or variable annuities. And so the way that we do it for that, and we've actually just been able to do the analysis for some of our longest standing customers, is looking at longitudinal data and being able to calculate correlative ROI. And the way that it works is that you can look at, for example, 12 months ago, Dan connects to me on LinkedIn. And subsequently, I post all kinds of content about how to save for your retirement, what the state of the gold and silver market is, Asian equities and how they're performing, and I can track through hearsay what Dan is clicking on, what he's sharing, what he's retweeting, what he's commenting on. And then now, 1 year later, those specific activities are correlated with Dan either converting into becoming my client or increasing his assets under management, or if it's an insurance example, he maybe has auto insurance with me, and now he's also buying life and home insurance. And so I can attribute at least part of that lift to that social media engagement because I'm comparing it to a baseline of clients or prospects who in my database otherwise look like Dan but didn't engage in those social media activities. And so that's exactly how we've done the correlative analysis. And even that, it's been really astounding how much ROI there is because, to your point, we know it intuitively, and just to be able to see this relationship actually deepened and this content actually positioned me as a financial advisor that people really trust as a subject matter expert. Turns out that when they're in the market, they think of me first, and also I help them realize that they need to be in the market sooner because I'm giving them these reasons, explaining why you need life insurance in the first place or why you should invest in these particular asset classes.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, just going back to what I said before, it's a very difficult thing to measure directly oftentimes. So, I mean, Clara's in a bit of a great situation in terms of measurement. Oftentimes, especially with internal types of use cases, you have people, sure, they're using Jive, they may be using email, lots of other things, and they may claim that a process, let's say, gets shortened because of use of this new tool. But attributing that to Jive versus some other thing that happens, it's really difficult to kind of tease apart. So one thing that we've been starting to do with customers is really digging in with them, digging in with the CFO's office, and constructing ways or use cases basically where we can see and attribute change over time. And it's very difficult, very costly to do for everybody involved, including our customers. So we're very careful to kind of pick and choose. And as I was saying earlier, some of those use cases are easier and more directly observable than others. But I think that said, there are some interesting new capabilities. So yeah, not all the ties or transactional systems are in place. But if you can use some of these big data techniques, especially that can crunch across different types of transactional systems and begin to do this kind of deeper analysis through cause and effect, I think we're starting to see some pretty interesting things emerge. And there's a lot more that needs to be done there. And I think that will continue to improve. But it's a major area where the entire space needs to mature, I think. Too many claims, not enough proof.
Let's have two more questions, and it's time for the lightning round.
Hi, my name is Vanessa Zucker. I'm from San Jose State. And I was thinking that we've moved from longhand blogs to like a medium format Facebook update to Twitter. So do you think we're getting more and more shorthand with the messages we send out and how we describe ourselves? And how does that affect information gathering and interacting with potential customers?
I don't know if we're getting, I guess generally we're getting more shorthand, but I'd like to go back to the pyramid metaphor I was using earlier. I think the people who were blogging, a lot of the people who were blogging before, they're still blogging. It's just that now there are more expressive ways for people who are in the middle and bottom layers who previously were not participating to now participate as curators by liking or commenting or sharing. And so that's why, I mean, there's 1 billion social network users across Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. There's not 1 billion bloggers. And maybe there's some cannibalization where people who were previously doing long form, now all they're doing is curation. But I think generally it just has meant more participation across the board. And I'd be curious to know what others think.
I think what I see, at least internally, I see we have the status board so people can have a very quick update if they want, a meeting they're going to or whatever. But what we find in the dialogues that we're having in communities, people actually write very long and quite thought out opinions and give a lot of advice. So I think it's probably quite contextual. We also see that with our customers. They can be very brief, we love you, or the opposite. And they can be, we do get people that love us. Love a banker today. But we also get very thoughtful suggestions, and so I do think it's contextual about what people want to communicate. Sometimes you can be short, and sometimes you've got a little bit more to say.
Last question.
Hi, good evening. Want to thank the panelists. It's been a wonderful discussion. I'm Chris Simpson with IBM. We had a fantastic conversation here at the table beforehand about the culture of sharing and the necessity of the culture of sharing within either internally or externally for really deriving value out of social. I'd be curious to hear the panelists' thoughts on that topic, and part two of that is sort of how do you drive a culture of sharing within your organization?
It's so critical, and for me it boils down to an issue of trust. How can you establish trust between people who may not know each other all that well, even within, say, an internal kind of company instance? Yeah, I mean, social is great because you're quote-unquote connecting lots of people, but there's still a lot of work to do in order to get those people to effectively share, contribute, swarm together across a particular problem. And it really boils down to good old human factors of how do you increase the amount of trust flowing through a system. And so there are lots of approaches to that, everything from team building exercises to, I think, one of the most effective things in an online sense has been for a lot of our customers just being very thoughtful about how they deploy and grow a new community. It's not about deployment of technology. That's the easiest thing to do. The hard bits are really around asking yourselves the hard questions, right? What kind of company are we? Let's be honest about our culture here, right? And let's try to fit together a set of approaches, tools, practices, norms that really fit the way that we currently operate, right? Because you're not going to fit some disruptive thing into a company and expect it to take off. That wouldn't work on lots of levels, and it doesn't for our customers. So we coach them through a pretty long process after they do a purchase with us of really understanding what it is they want to get out of it, what are their goals, how are they going to measure progress against those goals, and really drilling in this issue of trust. It really is the most fundamental piece of making an effective social community, whether it's online or offline.
So, so that culture of sharing is sort of an abstract goal in my practice and people I train. It's like drill down to the specifics. What does it mean? Post this, comment, and so on. Certainly, to get people to share more or enter a post or what have you, it's got to be super easy to do. Simplicity changes behavior. I believe behavior happens more because it's easy to do rather than people are motivated. Next, they have to be triggered to do it. You know, bam, share now, what have you. They have to have that prompt or reminder. And then last is understanding why would anybody share in the first place? What's their motive for sharing? And if there's some fear around it, guess what? It's going to be really hard to get them to share. So trust is sort of like baseline. And then on top of that, trigger it, make it super easy. Within a corporate context, I think the psychology of sharing might be different than general consumer. So what I'm going to say next, don't be shocked, it's more about general consumer. When people share and when things go viral, if you buy that word, I'm not sure I do, even though some of my students are awesome at it, they are sharing for their own purposes. They're not sharing to benefit other people. They're forwarding the video because it makes them look funny or smart or in the know. And I think those are the three core drivers for sharing in a consumer context. Not sure it's so true within the enterprise. There's probably, you know, do it for the good of the company or I'm a good employee, but maybe it really does boil back to those motives. So understanding why would people share in the first place. So I look at those three things. That's just how I view all behaviors. It's got to be prompted, it has to be easy to do, and there has to be some motivation there to do it.
BJ actually has a very nice matrix available on his website.
Yes, and I will teach you it now.
I think if you're going to go into social in the enterprise, you have to already have a culture of trust. I think if you don't have that, it's going to be an extraordinarily uphill battle. And the challenge is that, you know, when you first introduce social, you're going, and if you do it right, which I think right is open, unmoderated, you're not curating, you're actually saying we trust you, you're going to get things that, you know, may not sit that well with people. You're going to get, you know, tough feedback from employees that might never have been heard before. But I think, you know, sort of our approach to it was no one was ever reprimanded for anything they said, whether it was in focus groups with executives, and then as we got into social, when it went online. Certainly we'll do training and coaching on, you know, ponder before you post and think a little bit about, you know, how that's going to play. We'll do that proactively, but not as a, you know, coming down on people. And so I really think if you're thinking of getting into social inside the enterprise, you've just already got to have that great leadership culture, those strong leaders that have that intestinal fortitude, that somebody says, I don't like that policy, I don't agree with your decision, I think you get paid too much, whatever it is, that you're going to accept that as feedback and learn and grow to be a better company. And I think that's, you know, a fortunate position for us and lots of companies, but without that, I'd be afraid.
All right, time for the lightning round. This time, no pondering before you post. The idea is to answer quickly, all right? Okay. Here we go. We'll start with Wendy, and we'll go down this one. What industry has the most to gain from the use of social technologies?
Banking.
Health, wellness.
I didn't even hear the question.
Yeah. What industry has the most to gain from social technologies?
Ooh, you picked health? Oh, and you picked banking? Oh.
Don't criticize the answer.
Consumer retail.
How do you know?
Lightning round.
Consumer retail.
Impulse.
All of them.
What industry is most threatened by the rise of social technologies? Clara, coming back the other way.
Most threatened, you said?
Governments.
Very good.
David.
Legal.
BJ.
American Medical Association.
Wow. Consultants?
What's up that? What's up that? In what country will social have the most impact? And why?
Well, it started in the USA, so how about there? How about China, though? I met with the Bank of China. They have amazing social networks going there.
China's a good answer. I'm going to go for Brazil because they're so innately social. They're very social people. Yeah.
Two good answers. I actually still think the U.S., it could remake our local communities.
I'd have to go with China.
No Canada, really?
Oh, Canada.
What percentage of communications amongst people in their 20s will be through social technologies in 5 years?
Say that again, sorry.
What percentage of the communications of people in their 20s will be through social technologies?
All communications or just online communications?
Online.
75%.
90%.
I think 95.
90.
Oh, we were going higher. What percentage of communications amongst people in corporations will be through social technologies in 5 years?
5 years? Wow. 50.
40.
75%.
I think 100% because social will become a feature of all of our communication and workflow platforms.
Right on.
You said 5 years? 5 years? Okay.
No criticism. This is a question.
I'm clarifying the question.
All right. What will be the next significant social technology company to be acquired?
Pinterest. Pinterest.
Oh.
That's a good answer, Awesome.
It is an idea.
That's a good one.
I'm going to say Pinterest.
Twitter. Going out there.
I don't know.
Okay. What company is most likely to be the acquirer?
Oh, wow. Facebook.
Okay.
Google.
Facebook.
Google.
Oh, interesting. What will be the next significant social technology company to go public?
Hearsay Social.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Why are you high-fiving?
I like it when people go public.
Yeah.
We're
David?
friends. We're co-employed in a lot of places.
David?
Next company to go public in social space. That's a great question. I think it could be Twitter.
I don't want to give a duplicate answer, else I'll just hit Pinterest. I don't know. I don't follow.
I'll duplicate Twitter.
If you could invest in one social company other than your own, what would it be?
Oh my gosh, I don't know. LinkedIn.
BJ?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is solid. Yeah, so I'm going to give a repeat. Yeah.
Twitter.
I think after today, Facebook.
That's a good point.
And what will be the most impactful application of social technologies in the next 5 years?
I don't know. I mean, it's so profound. I think it's going to your point, it's sprinkled across everything that we do. And so 10 years ago, we were talking about how web technologies would change and what percentage of communications that we would do would be web-based, and it's just everywhere. It just permeates everything that we do and all of the applications and workflows personally and professionally.
That's your lightning round answer.
Repeat the question. I was listening to that.
I don't like to follow the rules.
David?
I think it's actually going to drive more